Hey, good morning, afternoon, or evening, good people, wherever you are, wherever you happen to be, and however we're together. Thanks for being here. I'm Dave, and this is Dave's Head. So, what's in my head? First of all, I had to clear my throat because I picked up a little bug on the way back from Tampa, or maybe while I was in Tampa last week. So, going to be on a struggle bus this episode, but we're pushing through to sunnier pastures in a couple days, so we just got to get right to get there. But the first thing that's on my mind is news that's crossed the globe in the last 48 hours. And that's the sudden and tragic passing of Malcolm-Jamal Warner while on vacation with his family. And when these things happen, and people we have a relationship with, and I'm using the term relationship very loosely, did not know Malcolm Jamal, never even met him as a fan, but grew up with his presence, The Cosby Show, obviously. That passing or those passings sent a shockwave through the entertainment world. Many of us grew up watching him. And just pausing this topic for a second, Ozzy, I want to say Ozzy Newsome. It's not Ozzy Newsome, but the rocker. And one of my friends sent me a message about this a little while ago that Ozzy passed. And, people say things come in threes, and hopefully that's not true. Knock on wood. Hopefully that didn't destroy your eardrums. But back to Malcolm, it reminds me in this passing, just like when Prince died, or MJ, or shoot, I can go back to Michael Landon when I was a kid and didn't have the exact same impact because I wasn't thinking about the other side of the hill. As many of us, my age, even younger, definitely older, are thinking about. But it reminds us of how fragile life really is. I had a conversation, again, with one of my closest friends about Malcolm. And I said to them, it's crazy how fragile this life thing is. My exact quote. It's crazy how fragile this life thing is. There's the 6 million ways to die thing, right? That's out there. Who knows if that's true or false? I have no idea. Something I've heard over and over and over again. These things remind you just how fragile life is. Malcolm wasn't just an actor, he was a cultural icon. His career spanned acting, advocacy, and not a lot of people know even music. I believe he was a Grammy Award winning artist on the musical side. And again, I apologize, it's through this episode. It's going to be a struggle to get through, but we're going to get through. The shock of his passing forces that reflection, right, on valuing our own lives, the moments we take for granted, the moments we cherish, the people we cherish. And it reminds me of the quote, literally from last episode, I believe. Even the darkest night will end and the sun will rise. Life operates in a very, very, very cool way sometimes. When you think about his family, and more details have come out since the initial shock and announcement of his passing, that he went for a sunrise-ish, that time frame, walk or swim, and who knows what happened. Many suspect, like I do, that maybe a rip tide or rip current pulled him out to sea. And it's one of those things where the cruelty of life, right? Because his family, they went there for vacation. And now there's a huge, huge void, not only in their lives, not only just figuratively around the world, but physically and poignantly in the very room they meant to spend whatever time they had left on their vacation. And that the sun will rise again the next day may be a beautiful view that their family may be waking up to the next day, but now he's no longer here. And every sunrise after that, that's their reality. And so when you think about these moments that we have with people we connect to who are popular or famous or a combination or somewhere in that threshold or scale, even people that we may see in our organizations we're part of or employment that we may hold, people we look at as bigger than thee. When these things happen, we are attached to them because we know them, know of them, or in this case, grew up with them being on our TV screens. It impacts us, makes us think, makes us stop and think about our mortality, makes us think about that cheesesteak we may have indulged in way too many times, or the fact that we aren't working out as much as we used to or should be, consuming too much alcohol, those types of things. It makes you think about that. You know, the six pack that's not there anymore, and I'm speaking about myself. But that reflection and the realization that we, while we value our life, may not be doing things of value for our lives or to our lives is a real thing. And it sucks that it takes these types of breaking news, people we relate to, connect to in some type of way, or even sometimes family members and friends, to get us to stop and think. And one thing I've talked about in this podcast a few times, not as much as other things, but definitely have said this in speeches I've given or conversations I've had or social media posts, and I've pointed it more in the direction of men, specifically black men, as I'm a black man. But we've got to do our checks. I did something 2 weeks ago, I believe it was, right before I went to Tampa, because something didn't feel right, so I went and got checked. Now, it could be nothing. It could be the thing that saves my life and extends it for another 5-10 years. Who knows? I actually have not seen the results yet, which is interesting. Whole nother topic. But we've got to do our checks. We've got to listen to our bodies. And my TO might say at times I don't. I fully, completely admit that. There are times I do not listen to my body. I've said for a long time now that my body will shut me down when I need to and when I refuse to shut myself down. That's great when you're 20 or 30, maybe even 40. When you're approaching 50 and you're going to 60 and 70, waiting for your body to shut you down isn't the solution, because your body may shut you down permanently. And so please, and not that this was, we don't know if this was related to anything physical, like heart condition or anything like that. We don't know that. It could come out that Malcolm was a physically fit specimen who just got caught in a rip current, and that would be so sad. But to bridge that gap between accidents in life and making sure that you aren't taken from this existence through preventative things that you did not do. Anytime this happens, take that moment to reflect. When's the last time I made a physical appointment? What am I eating? What am I consuming? Am I working out? Am I doing mental things every single day to promote and push and elevate my mental awareness, mental health, and that type of stuff? Just take a moment and go down a checklist, because you can't take every single day for granted. You can't take, I'll do that tomorrow or next week for granted, because tomorrow or next week honestly may not be here. And so please do your checks. Please run through your checklist. If you don't have one, create one. Very simple things you can do. Did I drink water today? Did I work out this week? Or a couple times this week? Did I go to bed before, I don't know, whatever time you have to go to bed to get you adequate sleep? All those things can help. Every single one. Before I get to the last thing in my head, Dave's Head Podcast is now a part of the Alive Podcast Network, home of Black Voices, where community, culture, and creatives live. Dave's Head Podcast adds to the catalog of over 70 titles available in the Alive Podcast Network app on both iOS and Android, and now you can find it on Fire TV, Roku TV, Apple TV, and more. Check out Dave's Head Podcast and many others in the Alive Podcast app, the home of Black Voices. The last thing that's in my head, I think last episode I told you that I was going to Tampa for my fraternity's conclave. And that towards the end of that week, my TO's birthday would be occurring. Thankfully, she's gracious enough to not be upset that I was going to have a conference the same week as her birthday. And so I traveled to Tampa, Florida for Phi Beta Sigma Fraternity Incorporated's Conclave, an unforgettable experience of brotherhood, business, and fellowshipping, right? Beyond the meetings, beyond the networking, I took the opportunity to show my TO just how much she means to me on her birthday. We had conversations around her birthday because it's not a milestone birthday. It's close, but it's not a milestone birthday. And so we had conversations around the fact that it was not a big deal, and those types of things. If you know me a little bit, if you follow me for any period of time on social media, if you've listened and watched, and hopefully you have, this podcast for multiple seasons, you know that I celebrate the birthdays of people who mean a lot to me. Whether it's a text or call, or in this case, my significant other, I celebrate the day that they were born, because if they were not reborn, I would not know them, assuming I was stillborn, right? Plus side of the calculation. But yesterday, actually, the trip was capped off by a surprise meet and greet with actor, author extraordinaire Blair Underwood, who you know from, I don't know, pick a movie, pick a TV series, you probably know. Now, I talked about before that Malcolm-Jamal Warner passed, and come to find out, and just recollecting too, that Blair Underwood began his career on the Cosby Show, and that Blair shared this very heartfelt, revealing revelation or reflection about his friendship with Malcolm-Jamal Warner, which began back then and continued to his passing a couple days ago. And it's moments, like these that remind me of the beauty of connection, shared memories, and that those things make life meaningful. I used to love is probably an overgeneralization, but love going to networking events. I've talked about people watching, talked about my love for travel. Those things have allowed me the ability to meet people who I still stay in contact with today, whether it's just through social media, whether it's, technically, which I don't travel to tech conferences that much anymore, but through my fraternity, through my sister sorority, and the D9 as a whole, there are people who I've met in my life through those organizations. The college or university that I've sat on boards for, the local advisory council I've sat on boards for, all these things have provided me an opportunity to network with people and create lasting relationships. And so, to me, I look at birthdays as a chance to celebrate you. And I do so in many different ways. And there are opportunities to be present a lot more, which I think I'll take advantage of more in the future. But there are opportunities where I can take advantage of these moments a lot more to show people in my life that I care about them. And birthdays are a great way to do that. Birthdays are the way that I look at as saying, again, if you were never born, I would have never met you. And so whether it's a milestone or minimum stone birthday, I just want to say thank you for being you. And so looking and contrasting this with Malcolm-Jamal Warner, you never know what chance encounter is going to lead to a lifelong relationship, friendship, whatever. You never know. So cherish those moments. Cherish the beauty of those moments. Cherish the unpredictability of those moments. Because somebody dropped a quarter on the ground. You picked it up and struck up a conversation. Or you two shared a bar at an airport. Or you went to a networking event. You never know. So cherish those moments and cherish every single moment you have every single day with all the people you care about, because you never know when any moment's going to be the last one. And that's what's in my head. So money isn't really what it used to be. Central banks and government aren't just setting interest rates, they're reshaping our daily reality. A recent article from Wallet Whispers, which I had not heard of before I did this research, they have an Exploring Money Printing and Its Economic Impact section of their website. There's an article entitled Exploring Money Printing and Its Economic Impact. Money Printing Consequences on Gold and Crypto Prices, 2025, so recently, by Leila Amina. Sorry if I butcher your name, Leila. Highlighting how continuous money printing by central banks fuels inflation and why 70% of investors are shifting towards assets like gold and crypto. A couple of key points they made in the article. Number one, escalating money supply means rising inflation, diminishing the fiat value. And this is over across the pond for those who are not familiar. 70% of investors may adopt gold and crypto as hedges by the end of 2025. 70%. They also say currency devaluation pushes divergent investment strategies, meaning you're not just going to the kind of mainstream or typical investment ideas, you're kind of branching out a little bit, i.e. crypto. The fourth one is digital assets gain serious traction as inflation hedges. That's financial speak talk for those you guys out there to know what that means. And then the last one, economic uncertainty renders traditional portfolios less effective. I can personally speak to this. Over the last couple of years, I have an investment portfolio that's, was marginally doubling every 6 to 8 months. And I'd say the last year and a half, that doubling has turned to a really small crawl, like a little faucet with a drip, drip, drip. Still increasing, but just ever so slowly. But to my chagrin, because I like to see that double keep happening. But talking about this because of my guest this episode, Ivan Pavlovic. And I apologize if I mispronounced that. I forgot to ask that. I usually do that with every guest. A little bit about him. He's self-educated economist and author of Making Money on the Money Printer. Born in Croatia, having lived across Europe, observing systemic economic inequality or inequity. Focuses on simplifying complex economic concepts for beginning investors. Shares insights on inflation, monetary policy, and how markets are shaped by government actions. Don't we know that for sure? Now, this article I talked about ties into Ivan's mission, empowering people to understand how inflation and monetary policy affect them directly. He breaks down how this impacts your daily purchases, housing prospects, and future savings, and how you can act to protect yourself. So with that, welcome Dave's Head, Ivan. How's it going?
Hi, thank you for inviting me. It's going well.
Good. Before I'll give the listeners and watchers a little sneak preview before we started recording. We both talked about how we're going through physically a little bit of under the spell of cold, flu, allergies, who knows. So we're both toughing it out here. So I do appreciate you coming on Dave's Head and going through this with me, I'll say.
Thank you. I appreciate that you showed up as well. So, and I appreciate that listeners are there as well. So, we all showed up. That's what sometimes matters.
Absolutely. Now, I know I gave a small intro for you, but like I love to do with all my guests, if you could take a moment in your own words and tell the people who you are, what you do, and what you're about.
Sure. I'll keep it very, very brief. So, my name is Ivan Pavlovic. I'm from Croatia originally. At the moment I live in Portugal, but in the meantime I lived in Luxembourg and Ireland. So basically my career path led me around Europe. Throughout this time, I got to see also, of course, a lot about life in those countries. And everyday life is very similar in Luxembourg, in Ireland, in Portugal, in Croatia for an average citizen. I was very lucky to be able to see that firsthand. And another thing is that, so as you mentioned, I'm self-educated on the topic of economics. I've spent years studying the subject of inflation precisely because it is so related to the financial markets and investments today. It normally would not have been the case, but for the financial system, the monetary system that we currently have. And so that's why this topic is so important to be discussed and to be studied, especially in today's day and age. My background is actually legal. I studied law, but having finished my studies in Luxembourg, I started my career path in finance, and then I was actually, more curious to find out and learn more about investing and financial instruments and markets and everything. And so all that path basically, and living as a foreigner in that country, led me to start actually educating myself about these subjects that are outside of usual scope of studies that they teach us in school.
Okay. So first of all, I admire the self-taught side of things. I think it's an opportunity to learn things a different way and still become an expert. So I do applaud you for that. For someone who may not be familiar with the term inflation, that means a lot of things to a lot of people, and I beg to bet that it means the wrong thing to a lot of people as well. So can you talk about what actually inflation is and how it impacts everyday people?
So that's an excellent question because I think when we speak about something, terminology is the first thing that has to be actually clarified. And so some people's mainstream news and everything speak about inflation as prices rising. So they will say there is inflation in food prices, meaning that food prices have risen. And then on the other side, you have Austrian economics, for example, which speaks about inflation as the expansion of money supply or currency supply. And so those two things are very different from each other because according to Austrian economics, you can have expansion of money supply, which basically does not need to necessarily lead to higher prices nominally. So something does not necessarily have to be more expensive than it was yesterday. Why? Because you could simultaneously have improvements in efficiency in capital process of production, and so those improvements would lead prices down simultaneously. And so actually prices would fall even though you have increase in money supply. But the key point to understand there is that the Austrian economy will then say, well, prices will not fall as much as they normally would have, but for the increase in money supply. And so that's very important because in this mainstream, which is economics, which is based on Keynesian economics, so-called Keynesian economics, they base everything on mathematical models and a lot of things where they believe that they can model the whole economy, meaning in simple language that they can centrally govern it somehow, right? If there are laws and you know what can be done to achieve something, well, then you can centrally manage it, right? So this is the justification. And so if there is inflation, meaning increase in prices according to Keynesian economics, that means that there must be a remedy for inflation. And so that's why we need the central planners and the central planning in general to be able to cope with inflation, because for them inflation is some kind of a strange phenomenon that just appears out of nowhere and strikes us, and so that's just in the beginning what we need to understand in terms of inflation. Of course, I'm the proponent of understanding that per Austrian school, money is something that we naturally, as human beings, we found. It is simply the most tradable commodity, most marketable commodity that has value based on how it trades versus other goods in economy. And so because it becomes the simplest way to transact with other people, people will then pick one or two types of commodities that will serve them as money, meaning as a medium of exchange. But that money will then have value because it is used for something and it is being traded versus other goods. So in other words, you're buying money when you're selling a good for that money, right? So if money is gold, for example, you're selling your shoe and somebody's paying you with gold, that means you're buying gold with that sale of shoe. And vice versa, if you're paying for a shoe with gold, you're basically selling money in those terms, right? And so money is something that we just came up with naturally. And then the government took the monopoly over coinage of money, and then it basically changed the language so that it says, well, money is not expressed as a weight of gold or something like that. Money is expressed as a currency, as a name of something, right? And so then they were able to modify that money by naming it differently, right? So they taught people that they should call their currency money and not
The
the
dollar,
underlying
the
wallet.
yen. Yeah.
Exactly. So that's why it's important to understand the difference in inflation in general and what is considered as money, because if we understand that increase in money supply actually then results in higher prices, or it results in prices not going down as much, then we understand that actually increase in money supply is simply bad if it's artificial, right? So that's the point.
So looking at purely economics, financial side, if you look at just policy, government policy versus general supply and demand versus, like you said, increase in money supply, which of those three, and maybe if you have others as well, is the biggest factor on influencing inflation to everyday people?
So I think it's for people it's pretty simple to understand once they understand that yes, you can have in certain sectors some disturbances, supply chain breaks, etc. Right? So, for example, what can happen is that oil can rise up in price because of supply and demand, right? Or there can be war, and then oil prices go up because, again, there is a supply crunch because of the war, right? So there can be these specific events, sudden events, which can also be some government, it can be natural disasters, government interference with regulations or taxes or whatever. The point is that if the price of oil then goes up, then all the goods that are related to oil in general will go up in price as well, right? Because, for example, if we need oil to produce plastic, and now oil is more expensive, well, then the cost of producing plastic will get more expensive. So all the goods that are packaged in plastic should normally go a bit up in price, right? But the point is, if there is a stable money supply, and so if there is no simultaneous increase in money supply in overall economy, then if price of oil and related goods goes up, people will have to cut spending on other things if they still want to continue buying those goods that they were buying before, plastic goods, oil goods, etc. Because if you have stable money supply, meaning a fixed more or less amount of money, so if you have, let's say, $10 and you've been spending 5 on plastic bags and 5 on other things, but the plastic bag now costs $6, well, now you only have $4 left if you bought that plastic bag, right? So that means, in other words, that means that you cannot go out now and spend with those $4 and buy something else and pay the same price as you did before. You will only be able to pay smaller price than you paid before. For example, for a t-shirt, right? And so that t-shirt cannot cost anymore €5 because now you only have 4. So the salesman will have to sell it for $4 now. So, of course, that would result in disturbances in economy and diminished standard of living if you have obviously problems such as oil prices rising. But that would not result in the disturbance in the same way as it is as it has been happening, so that everything is going up in price. The t-shirt is going up in price and plastic bags are going up in price. That can only happen if there is simultaneous increase in money supply across the entire economy. And so now you have more money, more currency to spend on oil, on plastic bags, and on t-shirts, basically. And this is why, of course, ultimately the salesmen have to increase their prices, because there is this increased amount of currency chasing limited supply of goods and services.
No, that makes sense. And you talked about how this impacts everyday people, and I keep coming back to that topic, if you will. Looking at the novice person who's out there, the person sitting at home, they're working their job, might have a small investment strategy here or there, or they're just saving in the savings account. How can someone who is a novice investor, is just an everyday person, come up with a traditional or protect their savings within a traditional setting, or looking at strategies when these traditional strategies fail? How can they protect their savings?
So I think that the first strategy for everyone, and again, I'm speaking here really as someone who is self-educated, but I've gone very deep in both economics and finance. I was interested primarily in investing. That's why I started learning about economics, to understand things better. I think that the first thing that everyone should do is educate themselves. Simply because, and I know that this takes more time, more additional time and everything, but simply put, I think that investing, it's a very tough thing. It's not as simple as, I'll get a mortgage and buy a house, and then, in 20 years I'll have double the money, for example. I mean, that's actually quite dangerous if people really understand how bad it can be, right? And I would say the same for any other asset. So I would say the same for stocks, for gold, for bonds. Bitcoin, again, cryptocurrencies. Everything always trades in relation to each other. And so I think one of the major lessons for everyone should be, and again, I just want to say here at the start, a standard disclaimer that this is not a financial advice for anyone. As I don't know anyone's, first, I'm not a financial advisor, and I also don't know anyone's particular personal situation. But so having that out of the way, so my personal opinion again is that number one thing, okay, what is valuable? First, I want to know what is valuable to own. I think that's a good start. What makes sense to own? What is something that has value? And value is subjective concept. Somebody will find higher value in one thing and someone will not. For example, you can see that very clearly with paintings. Somebody will be willing to spend $100 million for a painting, while other person will say, well, I mean, I could give you $10 for the same painting, but I don't find it nice or anything, So that's the concept of value is very subjective thing. And so when we are investing, what we actually want to know is what is it that I will buy that will actually go up in price? And that's practically that's impossible to know in advance, of course, because that's predicting future, and nobody knows for sure what will happen in the future. No financial professional can tell you, oh yeah, buy this is a safe bet. No, I mean, how do you know? How do you know? I don't know what's going to happen in 5 minutes. I mean, for sure, So how can you know what's going to happen in a year or 5 years time? So what is first, I think, what is valuable? Because if something is valuable, for example, a nice house at the seaside, first, row next to the sea, and well connected with roads and everything, nice infrastructure. I mean, that has value. You can live in that house. You can rent it out, probably, depending on the location and everything rules. So first thing is to find value. Second thing, I think, is to then look at the price. So even if this is valuable, how expensive it is actually in historical terms compared to other assets, right? How much of one thing do I need to buy another thing historically, right? Like, for example, how many ounces of gold do I need to buy a house? Is it very few or is it a lot? So that tells me then how cheap or expensive gold is towards house, and how cheap or expensive house is compared to gold. So this is the way people should think about buying things and trading them, basically, generally. And then, of course, next thing is a very, very, very important thing in investing, and that's risk, because there is risk in everything. So what is my risk if I buy this asset with the asset? So is there a government political risk? Something oftentimes very ignored, because people will, for example, know a lot about economics or investing, but maybe they will not focus on geopolitics. So if tomorrow you have some war, or God forbid, or something like that, and then a missile blows up the real estate you bought, well, that's, I mean, very unfortunate, right? Or if some government confiscates your house, for example. I mean, all these things are something that happens in human history, unfortunately. And so these are just examples of risk, but there are, of course, many other risks. Like I speak a lot about credit risk in my book, which is from Austrian business cycle theory, about the credit cycle, where basically there is the boom cycle when there are more loans issued, and where banks are in fact inflating money supply in the economy. And through this, everything looks good, because there is now suddenly more money slashing around, and so investors are willing to invest more. Entrepreneurs are willing to start new projects, hire more people, meaning employment goes up or unemployment goes down. And of course, the spenders also have more time to spend, as speculators to gamble. We saw what happened in crypto sector, I think around 2021, 2022. So suddenly everybody feels good. But that's because there is a false signal out there. There is false signal to entrepreneurs that there is actually more savings in the economy, because bank accounts are suddenly more full with money, and interest rates are down artificially. So it looks like as if people are willing to save. But then when all that money, so the projects start and all that money starts chasing same number of goods and services, and consumers in reality didn't change their time preferences. So consumers didn't really start saving. They continue to spend. And so now they're competing with the entrepreneurs for the same materials and everything. Basically, that leads then to higher prices of those goods suddenly. And then what happens is that entrepreneurs realize, oh, wait, we miscalculated our project. So somebody who is building a house and got a loan and was planning, a certain cost, and then year after they go into the project, but they realized, oh, I will actually have to spend more money to build that house to the end. Why? Because that money is actually this currency that there is actually much more of it out there, chasing same materials and everything that the builder of the house needs. And so now he will actually have to spend more of resources to finish the house. And so once that happens across the entire economy, here is where everything grinds to a halt, because first banks start becoming wary of issuing new loans. There are less and less borrowers who can, who prime borrowers, let's say, who could get safe loans. And then the people they stop spending, and the entrepreneurs, of course, they realize that now they have to correct their mistakes, and so some of them need to start firing people, close businesses, etc. And so now suddenly you have a downturn across all sectors or majority of sectors in economy. And so this is the credit cycle, and it's initially it's inflationary. In Keynesian terms, in the sense of prices rising, but it's also inflationary just generally because the money supply is growing. But then when you have bust, you have bankruptcies, you have effectively banks lending less, and so money supply also starts shrinking. So that's also according to Austrian theory, right? And so basically, this meddling with money leads to a lot of really problems in real economy. It's not just something that affects investors, it affects everyone. and that's very important. And that's not just the monetary system; that's the banking system really here that plays a big role there.
Yeah, I want to double back on something you mentioned a bit into that answer. You said that with the market, everything. I believe the phrase was everything is impacted by everything else when it comes to the market. Can you elaborate on that? I don't think that was the exact quote. I tried to keep it in my head, but
Okay.
it was something to the effect that everything impacts everything else when it comes to the market.
So I think, and again, I'm not 100% sure indeed what I said. So one thing was that I think we need to look at assets, how they trade according to each other, in which proportions historically. And then second thing is like in terms of this money supply, right? If you have increase in money supply, well, that will basically lower interest rates, because usually what happens is that when there is more money supply in the economy, banks lower rates, but it's also because bonds are being usually bought with this artificially created currency. And so the bonds, 10, 20, 30-year bonds, if they are being bought by the money that is artificially created by central banks, those newly issued bonds then are basically artificially manipulated because there is artificial demand for those bonds from the central bank, effectively, that just creates this currency out of nothing. And so if there is artificial demand, it means, so more demand means artificially higher price for those bonds, meaning artificially lower rates, because price of bonds and interest rate is inverse. They are inversely related. So what that means is then if the price of long-term bonds is going down, if the interest rate is going down, that interest rate also affects other interest rates in the economy. And so if for example, 30-year bond goes from 5% to 4%, then also the bankers will lower their mortgage rates for 30-year loans on mortgages, right? So, and then this will basically enable people to borrow more money. That will then affect housing prices, and then those prices will affect other things. And I think it was very simple to see it during basically COVID times, when what happened was a lot of stimulus, from fiscal stimulus, meaning that governments were effectively pumping money into economy directly. And so they were giving a lot of money to citizens. I think it was very prominent in US. We saw it also in Europe a lot. And so I'm guessing in many other countries was the same thing. So basically what happened was then it was very visible that within a year or two, everything went suddenly up in price a lot. I mean, we saw a lot of gambling on financial markets. Again, also, a bunch of cryptocurrencies went sky high. Bond market was generally lower still in the beginning. And I mean, just everyday items like the CPI index went ballistic. In many countries, we saw double-digit measurings, and I mean that's according to government's measures, which they can play with statistics a lot. So I think for people to simply understand it, it's very simple. It's if there is a will to pump additional currency in the economy, if that happens, if there are more loans issued, or if there is this fiscal stimulus from the governments, people will start spending that currency. They will not just hide it under their bed, and so that currency will chase different goods, different investments, different assets, and that will then obviously affect everyone in the economy. But those who receive the newly created currency first will benefit the most, because they are the ones who buy the assets at lower prices initially, and then everyone else, as this newly created currency spreads out through the economy, everyone else then starts chasing those same goods, and then the price starts rising. So those who got the newly created currency first and bought assets first, they basically benefited the most. And so this is why, for me, it's always funny when I hear some quite prominent people in the media, and when they say, well, I don't know, for example, from 2010 and until 2020, we didn't see inflation really. I mean, I don't know on which planet they live, because they, the housing prices everywhere were just rising like crazy. It's very simple for people to understand. Like, if you buy a car, you don't expect that car to be worth double the money in 10 years. You expect it to be worth much less in 10 years. And the house, how can it be that the house, as it gets older, is more valuable? It doesn't make sense unless there can be some certain reasons because of the location, etc. But generally, if all the houses are suddenly more valuable after 10 years, then that's a bit weird. And that can only happen if there is inflation. And when I say inflation, again, now we're going back to your first question about the definition, that's the expansion of money supply. And so we did have inflation, a lot of it, actually, in those last 10, 20 years, except that it did not chase as much the consumer goods around. It went into financial assets, it went into bond market, it went into stock market, it went into real estate. And so prices of all these things were rising, while the consumer price index was rising also, but not as significantly, especially because we did have, of course, simultaneously improvements in production processes, which kept lowering prices. So you had those forces balancing each other out.
Got you. And so, last question for this mini segment here. I want you to talk a little bit about your book, Making Money on the Money Printer, and talk about what was the genesis behind that, and obviously making money is an important thing that we all want to do. What kind of successes have come from that book?
I wanted to write a book just after I learned all these different things and studied all these different topics, because they are all connected. In my book concentrates around inflation in general, but it covers quite a few different topics that are connected with inflation, related to inflation, but they're also in a way different from each other. And so I think that first big problem for people is if they want to educate themselves, it's hard for them to start somewhere. If they go and take some financial course, I mean, those things are like how you can invest, what are stocks and bonds, and how you can invest in it, like, what are brokers. These are all valuable things to know, but it's like I don't know, somebody wants to, I don't know, understand how to play in a casino, and you just explain them the rules on the table, but you don't really teach them how to play the game and what's behind the game and everything, right? So I think that's why we need to first also understand economics, which is a very hard topic. It's on its own, and no, there is, even in Austrian economists, they will tell you, well, it's very hard to predict what will happen tomorrow, precisely because people are the economy, and people make their decisions based on their own personal preferences, millions of those personal preferences. And so that's why we cannot have central control and some bureaucrats deciding on the price of money or supply of money and reserves for the banks, etc. That is all just really playing with people's lives. And so I wanted to just test myself if I could provide something like this that might be of value to people. And so the topics that I covered then were first about what would normally happen in an economy, that the prices would go down, and how interest rates would go down naturally with savings. Second, what money is, and a bit about it through history. Third, how inflation then what is inflation? That this money is then corrupted actually, and then this then affects everyone in the economy. Basically by benefiting those who issue money, so usually governments, right? And of course, in today's age, banking sector. In fourth chapter, I then explained a bit about that system, and then in fifth chapter, we explain then these waves. So the boom bust cycle, according to the Austrian economics, well, which is triggered by the expansion of credit that is a result of fractional reserve banking system. And people who don't know what fractional reserve banking system is should really do good to educate themselves on that, even if they just Google it a bit for 2 or 3 minutes or watch on YouTube somewhere, because that's very important topic. Basically saying that banks are legally allowed to only hold a little fraction on their accounts and invest or loan out the everything else. So that's very important one. And then in the following chapters, I explain so then why like those Keynesian and Austrian theories, basically like why one is accepted, so it benefits the as a justification for central planners, and then what are then effects on the markets. So my idea was to connect all of these things, because I mean, honestly, if you go out and you study these things on your own, you have to study all of these topics, but to get the full view of these things, even basically, you have to, read through many books, listen to really many podcasts, and I mean, realistically, just people don't have a lot of time to do that, right? So, and again, I just wanted to first do it for kind of my friends and family. That was the initial idea, because I thought that initially I will just write something very short and basic, less than 100 pages, but then it did get into a more serious project. So that was behind the idea behind the book, and then the final result, something that was better than I expected.
And where can people get the book?
So the book is available on all Amazon sites. So Making Money on the Money Printer.
Okay. So that's all for the Q&A, and now I'm going to move to my favorite segment, I guess, called First Thoughts. But First Thoughts is brought to you in part by the Live Podcast Network. The Live Podcast Network is the home of Black Voices, where community, culture, and creatives live. Dave's Head Podcast adds to a catalog of over 70 titles available on the Live Podcast Network, the app for both iOS and Android, and as well is visually on Fire Stick, Roku TV, and Apple TV. Check out Dave's Head Podcast and many others on the Live Podcast Network app, the home of Black Voices. Now, Ivan, excuse me, working through my throat thing here.
No.
First Thoughts, yeah. First Thoughts, in case you're not familiar, is an opportunity for me to give my guest a word or a phrase and to get your first thoughts. Now, obviously, you're not privy to this because that would kind of ruin the First Thoughts mantra. So, you ready for some first thoughts?
Sure. Let's try it out.
All right. So, first thoughts is tariffs. What's your first thought?
Tax. So, basically, I think that as soon as the government imposes a fee for something, that's the form of tax, because somebody will have to pay higher price for the good or service.
Okay. Yeah, I 100% agree. I think this tariff war that's going on with the president of the U.S. Is something that's going to be detrimental, not only just monetarily, but relationships across the globe long term if this type of thing continues. So, while I don't think
so indeed, it's not just the president of the U.S. It's really many politicians around the world. I think, just really to be fair to U.S., there are like big tariffs that European Union as well has, and then I think Canadian citizens recently found out that even their states have tariffs towards each other within Canada. So politicians just like to play around, throw taxes and regulations, because if you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So what do they have? Yeah. They have the power of the pen, right? So they can legislate, regulate, and tax.
Yeah, no, I agree. I think this current war on tariffs that we have right now has been escalated. I think unnecessarily. I think there are better ways to negotiate and figure things out that don't hurt people so much. We'll see how that progresses and if that's possible.
Hopefully, they will come to good terms with each other.
Yeah, hope so. The second first thought, monetary fairness. What's your first thought?
Monetary fairness. Leave the money to the private sector and people figure out what money is. The banks will come up with some currencies as they did in the past. The banks will have to then be careful to keep clients' deposits on their accounts, because otherwise run-on bank would bankrupt the bank. And so then we will have, in time, we will have several trusted currencies that will be competing with each other. And then we will also have fairness, because the only fairness that we can have in economy is if there is free market. And free market will then bring, through competition basically, by offering better service to each other, it will then bring also better living standard and of course fairness because of meritocracy then.
Okay. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that except that I would love to see the private sector have more control over the economic and monetary direction of a lot of things, and just let things fall where they fall for the most part. Last first thought, empowered investing. What's your first thought?
Knowledge. My first thought is educate yourself as much as you can, because I keep reading different books about from economists, from investors. Recent one that I would definitely recommend to everyone that I've just finished is from Howard Marks. I think it's called Uncommon Sense for a Common Investor, if I'm not mistaken, which is great so that people can really understand the thinking that someone like Howard Marks has as a professional investor in terms of risk, what risk is, and what is really the asymmetry that he's looking for when investing, and value, of course, in investments. And so I think that empowered investing is really about knowing, trying to know what you don't know, really. Trying to think about what you haven't thought of, because all of this, there are so many different things that can go wrong once you put your money into something, that you really want to educate yourself as much as possible on human history, human nature a bit in markets, and then of course the more technical things about asset classes and different strategies that can help you on that journey of investing.
Okay. Yeah, I think with all things and everything, education is key. I mean, just jumping, feet first into any topic will get you in trouble a lot more than it will get you success. So I absolutely agree with that. All right. So that's the end of First Thoughts. And I started this last season where I offered, or what I call TO First Thoughts. It's where my guest has an opportunity to throw a word or phrase back at me to get my first thoughts. So, Ivan, if you had a first thought for me, what would it be?
And it has to have one or two words, right?
It could be a phrase as well, or a question.
Okay. So give me just a second. So investing for beginners. What is that for you? How do you see it? What is the...
Yeah, so my mentor told me, I'm going to date myself here, 30 years ago, that when looking at doing investing, pick stocks or areas that interest you. So if you're a gamer, you want to pick, gaming or development companies or even security companies, those types of things. If you're into agriculture, you may want to pick some corn or petroleum processing or something along those lines. If you're into clean energy, you want to pick, clean energy companies to focus your attention on. and invest in those after you do your research on the potential for those companies. Like you mentioned before, investing is a bit of a crapshoot, right? It's something that can go up and can go down. It's the risk that's involved. So you can only do so much research unless you're just really good at applying that research to your picks. But the first step for me is not to jump out of my comfort zone. I'm not an agriculturalist. I'm not a gamer in that sense. I do technology, but not on the gaming side. So I wouldn't invest in those companies because I don't know what I'm looking at to determine whether it's a worthy investment or not. So my first thought would be invest the time to do the research on the area that you have interest in, work in, or combination of the two, and go from there. You know, that's
Yeah,
what I would say.
I think that's a very, very good way of looking at it. And uh, as you said, it's really important for people, I think, to know what they are putting their money in.
Hmm. Absolutely, absolutely. And I think unless you just have a ton of money, and if you do have a ton of money, then you can invest whatever you want to. But if your money is as valuable to you as most people, especially beginners, that value is, then take the time, research, find something that you are enjoying, something you're interested in, something that you do. And, as long as there's no conflict of interest, professionally, that type of thing, invest in it. Don't do insider trading. Again, disclaimer, I do not advocate for insider trading. Do the research and apply that research legally.
Of course.
All right, Ivan. This was a great time. I appreciate you stepping into Dave's head for this conversation. As I always do, my guests, before I let you go, take a moment. Is there anything you want to talk about or promote? Feel free to do so.
Thank you for giving me that last word. I think, again, I would just really ask people to, if they haven't already started, to start educating themselves, because I'm personally of the view that next few years will become very turbulent. And so, as you said, unless you're someone who has a ton of money, well, then you will probably be a bit better off. But I'm honestly worried even for people who would have ton of money, because I think that money might be a target. And so people would definitely do good to educate themselves, not just generally about investing, but things that are related to investing. And so a bit about economics, which is related to human nature and history, which are all interesting topics. And then also geopolitics, which affects investments heavily, especially in current world environment. And one thing that I would just want to add here as an example is, like, think about investing internationally as well, because if your portfolio has gone up, let's say 30% over 5 years, but your currency has gone down 70% towards some other currency, did you really make much money? So these are all things that need to be considered. And of course, people who have grown up in very big countries, powerful countries, they will not concern themselves too much about investing abroad. But I think that generally, the environment at the moment, at least, is not that great in what used to be called world's safest and most prosperous countries for investors. And so I think, again, I would encourage people really to go out. If you want to read my book, get it on Amazon. I make very, very small money, so I'm not doing these things to really make something out of it financially. I'm doing it because I was just blown away. I was in my late 20s when I started learning about all these topics, and then I just realized how much there is that we are not being taught through education. And so start with this kind of podcast, and then go out and chase more material, chase more knowledge, because that can only do you good. And then when you do have some knowledge, don't rush into any decision making, because emotions can take you on then, whether it's fear emotions, and now you suddenly you learn something, and now you you want to act upon it, or whether it's excitement because now you know that you're maybe ahead of someone else and you become greedy and now you want to throw everything into that one idea. So I just want to warn people, if you do investing, do it gradually, and especially if you cannot risk too much, and really take your time with decision making, because there will always be some good opportunities out there. But if you've made a bad decision, a bad mistake, then that can cost you for a long time.
Yeah, it's an interesting point to, even if you learn something, a great nugget, a great gem, and you think you might have a leg up, or you're, like you said, the other side of the emotion is you might be now terrified, still take time, take a breath, take a beat, and analyze that knowledge, maybe even seek more knowledge or more clarification before you make an actual choice. So I do love that.
Yes, yeah, thank you.
All right, Ivan, again, thank you for stepping to Dave's head. And as I've been saying all this season, may every today be the best day of your life. Thanks for joining.
Thank you, and same to you.
My absolute favorite segment of my podcast is my GRIN, which stands for Great Reason to Be in Love with Now. I think I've, lack of a better word right now, bombarded this episode talking about this topic, but it's something that's struck my heart, stayed on my heart, and I want to project it off my heart. And so I'm going to talk again about the loss of Malcolm-Jamal Warner as a GRIN. And I'll explain why. His loss, obviously a sobering reminder that life is fragile and unpredictable. Very much so. And that's why, going back to what I talked about in my opening, what's in my head segment, that's why when my TO communicated that this birthday was not that big of a deal. And even if loved ones of yours dismiss non-milestone birthdays, you should still try to make those moments count. Celebrate them loudly within their comfort zone. Because obviously if they say, listen, this is not a big birthday, I don't want anything at all, I want to sit on my couch eating Cheetos and drinking root beer, don't bother me, don't call me, I don't want to go anywhere, don't surprise me, don't do anything. If they say all that, you still might be able to do something. Maybe. I'm joking. Obviously, if they say all that, listen, I get it. You don't want to do anything. But if they kind of say, you don't have to do anything really that big, it's just a non-milestone birthday, no big deal, you can still do things that are not quote-unquote that big to celebrate them loudly-ish, right? Again, got to know your people, got to know what's happening with them, got to know what they're going to be accepting of. But the main thing about it is tomorrow's never promised. And so even if today they don't want anything big, give them something of meaning, right? Because tomorrow you may not be able to do that. Tell them how often they mean to you. It's not about the event. It's about the message, and more importantly, or equally important, I should say, the memory. Because if the message sucks, the memory is not going to be great. So equally important, what you do, what you say, the message you convey, the memory you make. Shows them, tells them, and that's in reverse order of importance. Tell them, but show them what they mean to you. Whether it's a surprise celebration, a heartfelt note, a shared moment, it all adds up to a legacy of love and presence, and creates memories on top of memories on top of memories, which builds this muscle memory of love from you. And so absolutely listen to them. Listen, if they want nothing, they want to do nothing, do not bother them, do not call them. I get it. Be present in a different way that's not that overbearing. Again, consider your audience. Consider what they are, who they are, what they're going through. Because some of us get midlife crisis. I will tell you a quick story. When I turned 30 some years ago, I had for like 2-3 days, and it may not sound like a lot to a lot of people, 2-3 days for somebody who's been an athlete all their life, been just ripping and running. That's a term for the East Coast. Ripping and running and doing whatever, staying up half the night, partying with friends, getting up early in the morning, working out, doing all these things. 30 popped up, and this guy said, "Whoa, what the hell is going on? I'm 30 tomorrow." And I'll never forget, I believe I got this memory correctly. I went to go see No Country for Old Men in the theater on my 30th birthday. I'm pretty sure that that's what I saw. And this might, now that I'm thinking about it, that might have been a cruel joke. Because it was a gift of a movie pass, and I think I got a massage or something like that right after. And it was a pass. So I could choose whatever movie I wanted to, obviously. But to where the pass were, or was, there was like two choices. It was like No Country for Old Men and some like play rendition of some movie I'd never heard of, no play I've never seen before. So it was No Country for Old Men. Do with that what you will. It might have been a cruel joke. In retrospect, it might have actually been a cruel joke. But for about 3 days, I had this, man, I'm 30. Now, for whatever reason, when I turned 40, I wasn't thinking negative at all. I enjoyed my 30s. I had a great time in my 30s. And I think when 40 came around, I felt like a more mature man as opposed to an aging one. And so the memories I think I created in my 30s set me up for success as 40 turned around, where I embraced it. I was ready to rock and roll. And despite the things that I may have been going through, I think it actually prepared me to endure those and persevere through them. The hardness of those memories. So again, surprise celebration, heartfelt note, shared moment. It all adds up to a legacy of love and your presence, the memories that matter most. It's most important. I want to thank Ivan Pavlovic, author of Making Money on the Money Printer. We all want to do that. For stepping into Dave's head and providing some, I want to say, nuggets of inspiration to learn more. Because when you look at this topic, you look at what's going on in this world, or as law enforcement officers like to say, in this day and age, when you look at the things that are going on in this day and age, protecting your assets, growing your assets, securing your assets, and having them there for when you need them, whether it's tomorrow, next month, or 20 years from now when you retire, it's important to know the system, know how to navigate the system, even play the system if you need to ensure you and your family have what they need when the time comes for what they need. So I want to thank Ivan for stepping to Dave's head. You can check him out on X at Ivan with 2 N's, PV like Victor L. So Ivan PVL. Lastly, I started leaving quotes at the end of episodes this season. And I always do research based on what the topics I've talked about, the GRIN that I provide. I'll try to tie that into it. This quote actually, to me, ties in perfectly with my opening segment, what's in my head, closing segment, my GRIN, are both bookending the entire topic of the day, which is the moments you have. And so I talked about doing for my TO the things I did. I didn't mention the details. If you follow me on social, you know the details of the things that I did, both in Tampa and back here at home. And this quote comes from me, actually, because I posted on social media and I kind of detailed a few of the items that I'd done. And what touched my heart that moment, came from my heart, my spirit that moment, is this. Words are amazing. Action is undeniable. Now I will say, full caveat, I have no idea if this is a quote that should be attributed to someone. I did not even research it because when I thought of it, I thought the words, I typed the words, and that was it. Could I have heard of it somewhere before? I have no idea. But to me, this quote is from me, at least in the last 7 days. Words are amazing. Action is undeniable. You can say and type and write and text and all these things to your heart's content. But your action speaks volumes for who you are and what you're trying to convey. If your words and actions don't match, it doesn't matter. I'll say that the right way. Again, if your words and actions don't match, it doesn't matter. And so be a man or woman of your word. Let your actions reflect your words. And to the people you love every single day, tell them, and more importantly, show them. Before I let you go, if you've been with me for more than one season, you know that August is my month off. One of them, anyway. That's right, no episodes during the month of August. I will see you the second Friday in September, where I have guests lined up all the way through the rest of the season. I cannot wait for you to hear them, hear their good nuggets, and talk about some good stuff. So, until then, take care of yourself, enjoy the rest of your summer, and again, it's about action, not words. So, moments, making money, and memories. All great reasons to be in love with now. That's all for this episode of Dave's Head. If you enjoyed this episode, I'm sure you'll love similar content in the Alive Podcast Network app. Plus, you can support this podcast and enjoy ad-free listening to nearly 100 other Black-hosted podcasts. Download the iOS or Android app, become a member, and experience unlimited access to Black-hosted content week after week. Follow, like, and or subscribe to this podcast on Facebook, Instagram, and or X at Dave's Head Pod, and on YouTube at Dave's Head Podcast. For more information and links to all things Dave's Head, check out our website at daveshead.card.co. Episode premiere on the second and fourth Fridays of the month. Thanks for tuning in, and remember, enjoy life because life should be fun. Take care.